Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to TRTN and tonight's coverage of VSR Phoenix Season 8 Round 2 here at a very, very historic location indeed. As ever, I am Regan Clark, and you join me from the historic Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps today in Stavelot, Belgium, on what looks to be nice, bright and sunny conditions for the second round of the championship, as we just look in here in the paddock right before the start of qualifying with last week's race winner. Last week's podium setter, White Doctor. Of course, last week's race winner was OSR. We have Juan Pablo Valletta, 19, asking how he can join this league. We'll send a link into the chat in a moment's time, just before we get on to the start of qualifying. About 40 seconds left to go then, as we check in here in free practice. We do see a few drivers out on track at the moment. It was a bit of a tumultuous last week round for the opening of Season 8, especially for quite a few across the paddock. We see here Blue Frog with a little bit of chicanery going on his way down the Kemmel Straight. See trouble there for the number 61 as he makes his way down through Lacombe and Melmedy. To get on to there, the start of qualifying for today, 20 minutes on the clock for round 2's qualifying as we kick things off here in the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. We'll just be with you in one moment's time. There at the start, 30 seconds already having passed. We're going to get on board with Elite Cassie NL, who starts off this qualifying session today on his way down to Lacombe and Melmedy here at Spa. Of course, one of the holy trifecta of interwar circuits to have been introduced at the start of the 1920s in Europe, alongside the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza and the Circuit della Sarthe, of which came out in 1922 and 1923 respectively. We stay on board then with Elite Cassie, as we'll be getting our first flying lap over the course of today's qualifying session. And it was a very interesting last round, to say the least, for the driver right behind him in the 999 of Just Boris. Last season's champion had quite a mare in the task of overtaking the number 4 of Shawnee Mack last week on the Watkins Glen International Circuit, ultimately resulting in an incident that took him out of the fight. He now starts round 2 of the championship, 28th overall and 10th in category. We'll get on to our qualifying predictions and championship standings in a moment's time, as you stay on board here just for a moment with Elite Cassie NL. As for Juan Pablo Valletta, 19, we have a link for you now. It's just in the chat for you as we make our way around Blanchimont. So having a look at our qualifying predictions for today, it's looking very strong for White Doctor, who was on the podium last week with Aston Martin. He was right behind OSR Saturn on the podium in Watkins Glen. He's now been since promoted to the gold category out of silver, with Just Boris lining up alongside him in qualifying predictions, of which were taken earlier this morning. It's about 0.2 and 0.09 of a second dividing the pair. Coming out of today's qualifying predictions, Audi Pete lines up third, ahead of VSR Chris, Tyler Vermack rounding out that top 5, VSR Grizz, VSR Antion, Wishful Winnings, Blue Frog and Twiglet rounding out the top 10. So on our way down through Eau Rouge and Radion, we've already passed La Source, which would have been the opening turn for the Grand Prix run of this. Of course, we'll be starting this on the GT opening straight just after La Source and heading around turn 2 on the first of the long runs down towards Eau Rouge and Radion. We're out of turn 6 now on our way up the Kemmel straight down towards Lacombe and Melmedy at turn 7 through 9. Down towards now Bruxelles, turn 10, sometimes also called Rivage, and heading straight into turn 11 thereafter, the no-name corner, sometimes also called the Jackie X corner, as was coined in 2022. So Elite Cassie will be the first of our times on the chart. Then behind him will be Just Boris, and then Blue Frog and Grizz, making our top 4 times on the chart to kick off qualifying. 16.5 minutes then on the clock here as we round Pool 1 at turn 12 and down towards Campus at turns 13 and 14. Sometimes also Fangye and Campus at turn 13 and 14. Then from Campus comes Stavolo at turn 15 in a moment's time as we head towards the curb of Paul Frere. Now at it's Stavolo, turn 15. Now towards the curb of Paul Frere, sometimes also called the curve Paul Frere, as we head out of turn 16. This begins the long run down through Sector 3 on the largest freestanding FIA Grade 1 structure. Looking at it here on the chart, 4.3 miles and just about over 7 kilometres of FIA Grade 1, 20 turns in all. So out through turn 17 and 18 at Blanchemont, down towards turn 19 at 20 at the bus stop Chicane, to bring us to the end of our opening laps here in qualifying. It's Elite Cassie then onto the timing charts. We'll bring it up on the right-hand side. Cassie just towards the line now at 2:18.1 by the number 98 BMW behind him. Just Boris takes the fastest time at 2:17.415. Next to the line was the number 61 of the Blue Frog. Behind him as well is the number 44 of Grizz with the Audi team. One of a few Audis in this. Speaking of Audi, there's Audi Pete making third by 1.2 seconds to pole position. Quickly on his trails there is White Doctor inside the top 5, just pushed out there by Tommy XXC in the Porsche number 66. He makes the top 5 now with White Doctor pushed down to 6th. Wishful Winnings pushed down an extra position as well as all 3 of our drivers there, as Blue Frog usurps the top 5 as Essen Quis makes 4th. Making our way then out of Eau Rouge and Radion down the Kemmel Straight. Already an interesting ensemble of times. The gap between Cassie and Boris separated by 6 tenths, just under 7 tenths of a second. 2:17.415 to just over the 2:18 mark between the pair of them. One driver we've been owing to give a little bit more screen time to, in agreement with him there if he is in this qualifying session today, though it doesn't appear to be the case, was Soviet Mario. We cannot seem to find him. We made the clerical error of assuming he was formerly with BMW. That is not the case. He was with Ford last season as a way of repaying, and then we were going to give him more screen time, but we can't actually seem to find him, not even on the lists here. So we can see down at the bottom, Tommy Johansson has taken an early sabbatical of this qualifying session, disqualified in the number 71 Aston Martin. Looking up back towards that top 5, you can see business as usual from where we last left it off. Lamborghini from BMW, Audi and 2 Fords inside the top 5. Just outside it then Porsche, Aston, McLaren, Ford and Ferrari. That's from Tommy, White Doctor, ETE Gilles, Hin Hin Papi and Antion. .13 minutes left to go then. Boris crosses the line. Does he extend the gap to the ultra-low 2:17s that we've been seeing on the predictions coming into this round? Not on this lap just gone. Elite Cassie slowly reeling him in, but maintains that 4/10 of a second gap for the time being. Audi Pete is the one closing the gap even further by 0.02 of a second. If you want to be technical, it's 108 thousandths there between the pair inside that 2 and 3 position, just from the first to the second row. Tommy XXC then makes the top 5 ahead of VSR, Grizz and Quis and Blue Frog, both for Fords, relegated down to 6th and 7th. Speaking of, let's have a look at the balance of performance coming into today. As you can see, Ford are on the back foot with 20 kilos added onto the Mustang coming into Spa. Lexus still in the minuses with 16 kilos lost on the Lexus RCF. Mercedes, Aston and Lamborghini, the only other 3 manufacturers to see any kind of weight loss coming into this round, 9, 7 and 5 kilos respectively between the AMG, the Vantage and the Huracan. Porsche gaining a kilo alongside Audi, of which gains a kilo on its R8 LMS Evo 2 model, the only one currently still in circulation. BMW gaining 3 kilos, Ferrari gaining 4, McLaren gaining 6, and as we've mentioned, Ford gaining 20. It's going to be a very tough qualifying session for our front-running Fords of Essen Quis and the Blue Frog, who we can see right now on screen making their way around Pool 1 at turn 12. Now having a look at those previous winners, only one to speak of at the moment. That's OSR Saturn in the Lamborghini Huracan, of which took a decisive victory last round, much to the chagrin of last season's champion Just Boris, who after that unfortunate incident trying to lap Shawnee Mack ended up 28th overall heading into round 2. We can see right now not a huge shake-up in the way of things inside that pivotal top 5. Now, as with any qualifying, getting towards the front row is absolutely integral. It couldn't be any further explained at a track like the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. You do not want to be in the danger zone between P5 and I'd say P20 is going to be that major crunch zone we see coming out of La Source and into Eau Rouge and Radion is going to be where the bulk of our action goes on in terms of spin-outs, in terms of side-by-side, in terms of contact, in terms of anything that could spell an early doom to one's race. See at the moment, White Doctor, though, by a single hundredth of a second, makes it to second place. That is definitely going to send a few chills up the spine of the leading Lamborghini in qualifying at the moment. Just Boris, who's just making his way out of turn 6 and down the Kemmel Straight. With 10 minutes left to go then, that's quite the message to be sent by White Doctor in the number 54 on his recent promotion to the gold category out of a very, very short tenure in silver. Having a look around the track here as we get our timing shots back up on the top left. Right now on board with VSR Dollar Up. Down in the bronze category, the solitary Lexus of this championship, filling in for last season's solitary Lexus entry of GTR Twiglet, since moved away now to other manufacturers and onto greener pastures for Season 8. Dollar Up takes up the mantle of the old school Lexus RCF, a surviving mark of endurance racing. On his way down to Blanchemont. That was a major upset there, heading out of Blanchemont. I was just having a sip on my drink there, nearly spat it out. That was quite a violent overreaction by the Lexus. It's a good job then that Dollar Up was able to keep the car under control. Fortunately, he's only had to come to the side of the road and make a full stop. I've seen much more violent exits of that section of the track, especially over in the Sunday League as well, which we were at Spa a few rounds ago. This is AERT Zach. Now, we've not heard the AERT namesake for quite a long time. Long-time viewers of TRTN will recognise AERT all the way back during the time of the GHR Xbox Endurance Championship so many months ago. That is an incredibly old namesake. Now, apparently AERT is on the way back up, so I've heard through rumours circulating around the paddock. And good on them. It is good to see a team with such gravitas return to the field. Right now, Zach, a newcomer in the number 55 McLaren 720S, on his way down towards turn 13 and 14 there. Got ahead of myself. He's down at campus. Now on his way around turn 15 to turn 16 from Stavelot to the curb of Paul Frere. Currently, though, invalidated on his time. He was up by 0.4 of a second. Having a look around the field again, here's VSR Otzi also on an outlap at the moment. So looking around the field for where our next improvements are coming from. We're going to try just now to get on board the number 420. It's Regent in the Ford Mustang. Now Ford, like we mentioned, were on the back foot coming into this round, but with a 7/10 improvement, he's up from 13th to 9th for the end of that last lap. Gone behind him, Chris MCK08, the Silver Championship leader, still in a reluctant P17. So a bit of a tough qualifying here in the opening half as we're just over halfway. 7 minutes 40 seconds left to go. We're on board with VSR Funky Fish, one of the runner-ups in silver last season, now under the label of Porsche in the number 982 on his way out of turn 6, but it looks like a very early invalidation. He's down by 0.4 of a second and on an invalidated time, no less. It's not going to be an easy end to qualifying, I imagine, for quite a few here. We also see Wish for Winning's return, now competing from the reserve category for the time being until he's placed into the correct category. Now, I believe last season he competed in silver, though his skills definitely have left a lot up to question as to whether or not he should have been placed into gold. So we'll see what Wishful is capable of here in round 2 of the championship. It's been quite a mix-up. We'll be on to the overall championship standings over the course of our grid formation, but for now we can take a look at the class standings from silver, gold and bronze. Looking in the gold standings, of course, OSR Saturn, despite being on a sabbatical for this round, does hold on to the championship lead, but it will only be for one more round, with the end of this round today bringing a very swift end to the Frenchman's lead of the championship. White Doctor 5 points behind him, 9 points behind the pair of them is the Blue Frog in the number 61. Soviet Mario inside the top 5 with 35 points, Regent with 32, E.T. Jules with 28, Elite Cassie with 24, Tyler Vermack with 13, VSR Chris with 4, and Just Boris with 1 point. He's 10th in class, 28th overall, not the best start of the season for Season 7's champion. We check in here with Chris MCK08, very fortunate timing here as we get on to the silver standings, as he leads the charge by 8 points to Boy Shea in the number 7, the number 81 leading the charge with Ferrari. VSR Otzi, last season's silver champion, makes third at the moment by a make that 12 actually, point gap to the leading car. 26 points for VSR Otzi. Behind him by 4 points is Audi Pete in the number 77, Audi R8 making the top 5. And behind him, GTR Twiglet in the number 96. VSR Funky Fish behind them, VSR Grizz with 12 points. Tommy Johansson a single point behind, and that's the same story for the car behind him, the 888 of Essen Queese with 10 points. And then same story for VSR Antion on his promotion out of bronze and into silver. Taz MCFC rounds out the silver standings with a meagre 2 points. Looking into the bronze championship standings, Jayco leads the charge by 2 points to VSR Dollar Up, and he's 7 points ahead of VSR Smiler, who was in the running standings for a bronze to silver promotion last season, was pipped to the post by VSR Antion. A big slide there corrected by Chris MCK, fortunate not to end up in either side of the Tech Pro barriers on his way up Eau Rouge and Radion. Further down in that standings then, VSR Racing with 6 points, Shawnee Mack with 5, Abok with 3, and Aussie with a reluctant 0 points. He's at the back of both overall and class standings. So taking a look in then with our next cars down towards the line on a valid lap, we look to be getting on board in a moment's time with the number 98, so it appears, as it makes its way down towards the double set of corners at Blanchimont, turns 17 and 18. It's Elite Cassie in the number 98 BMW. Right now, doesn't appear to be on that close an improvement. I think he was just waiting for this last corner here. That might have been a sort of Achilles heel for the BMW's performance. You can see, though, as he escapes turn 20, it's going to drop back into the positives for him. Sadly, not an improvement over the course of this last lap gone, but with 4 more minutes left to go, roughly just about a lap and a half's time left for all of our drivers today. Still out on track and plenty to discuss. Cassie, chief among them, makes 4th. Looking in with the number 61, if we can catch them out of turn 19 and 20. It's the Blue Frog with Ford. Now battling that 20 kilo ballast. It's definitely going to be one to impress, and up from 7th goes to 6th with a 2:18.110 for the number 61. Very impressively done, and already starting his next flying lap on an improvement. We'll catch up with them later on. Fellow Ford Essen Queese making their way up through Eau Rouge and Radion as we speak. Exiting the pit lane from behind appears to be Soviet Mario in the number 26 McLaren. So better late than never for Soviet. We did want to give him a little bit more screen time over the course of the session. We can see as well wishful winnings on a sizable improvement as he makes his way around turn 12 in the number 23 Ferrari. Quickly checking in here as we see VSR Otzi from 17th position, over a half a second up on his personal best. Could be a promotion up to the top 15 as he gets down to the line. He's up to 11th. Behind him there, Shawnee Mack crosses the line from 26th and remains there over the course of his last qualifying lap. The 54 crosses the line. White Doctor remains 2nd as he crosses the start-finish line there. A very reluctant position for him, knowing just how tantalisingly close pole position has been over the course of the last 10 minutes of qualifying for him. As we drop down then to the last couple of laps for our drivers today, it is going to be a real shootout then between Just Boris and White Doctor. As you can see, as we drop the gap away, it's gone actually quite heavily in the favour of Just Boris. Now, the last time we saw this gap, it was 10 thousandths of a second. Now that has expanded up to 4/10ths of a second there. Just nearly half a second between the pair of them. And it makes an Aston Martin 2 and 3 with the presence of Tyler Vermack. The number 94 from South Africa makes 3rd ahead of Elite Cassie with BMW. Quickly see here as it's only 7/100ths of a second between the two in that second row. What is the retort from the BMW down to the line here amongst the final laps he'll be able to do in qualifying today? reluctantly throwing the towel in. That's the end of qualifying for Elite Cassies. He brings himself back to the paddock here for round 2. Quickly see here, we did see Increase was on an improvement, but it appeared in the last time we saw him that his lap was invalid. We'll see if it counts against the stewards. He gets to the line, goes from 12th up to 9th, so definitely not for the sake of the 888 Ford Mustang. OS Increase very, very nicely done then amongst the final moments of quali. Number 996 we try and get on board with here. Taz MCFC with McLaren, used to drive with Ford last season, crossing the line then up to 21st over the course of the last lap. Checking back in then with Oatsy as we're among the final seconds of quali then. Our last times coming through. The number 6 leading the charge of the valid times. Ahead of him is the 77, which looks to have at least one more go as it gets down to the start-finish line. That'll be Audi Pete, who's already had a very strong quali session, especially for the Audi R8, which is, by no stretch of the imagination here on console, the most popular choice around. As he crosses the line then, he's inside the top 5. Oatsy then to the line. Does he make his way to the top 10? Absolutely. Gets up to 9th on the course of that last lap. Very, very well done then. See a myriad of drivers making their way onto one final run of the circuit. We can see here amongst the charges, Regent. Beside him there, I believe, was Tyler Vermack, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, no, Vermack is in at the pit lane. And up to 2nd ahead of White Doctor. So the Aston swapping places there right at the very end of quali. We'll stay on board then with Regent. We'll get back on board on the proper camera so we can show you whether or not he'll succeed or fail in an improvement up into the top 10. We're on board with Regent among several drivers to make their way to the line. The number 1 as well as next up. That would be VSR Antion. And then the 888 as well on their way down to the start-finish line. We're on board with Regent. Trouble there out of turn 11 has definitely thrown his hopes of an improvement by the wayside as he gets down towards turn 12. Definite struggles there for Ford and for Regent. We see here Blue Frog crosses the line 7th with a 2:18.027. His final improvement here in qualifying sees him up into the top 10 for the race start. He'll be starting alongside Quees, fellow Ford in the 888. Trying to catch on board then with the 77 as it's the next car down towards the line. As we scroll through the menus here, the number 77 of Audi Pete has seen continual improvement over the course of quali today. And in the Audi R8, it has been a very, very impressive showing. Now as we get down towards the line, let's see what time he rakes in. Across the line he goes from 5th up to 4th then. A very grand exit by Audi Sports, Audi Pete, and the number 77. Trying to catch the number 4 here right at the end of their qualifying endeavours. Let's see if we can just about get them. It's Shawnee Mack to the line, then the number 66 behind them of Tommy. The McLaren with half a second to give ends qualifying in 27th position. Trying to quickly catch on board with the 66 here of Tommy, who wowed expectations back in Zolder last season. Now drives for Porsche as he crosses the line, sadly only to see P12 at the end of the session. So try as he may there, sadly won't be a top 10 start. We'll have plenty of time though over the course of the hour of racing ahead of us here in round 2 of the championship to make amends with a top 10 finish. So what an interesting end we've got. Full grid rundown will be in a moment's time. Right now, though, let's just discuss the 2 bits of news we have for today. As of the time of recording, the 7th of May 2025, of course, first of the news was Oscar Piastri winning the Miami Grand Prix. It puts the Australian even further into the lead of the Formula One World Championship. thus raising the question between speculators and fans alike of whether or not he can accelerate this into his first career championship. He'll be the first Australian driver to win an F1 championship since Alan Jones with Williams in 1980, a factor of 45 years in difference. The second bit of news comes from the world of the FIA as Carlos Sainz Sr. considers his run for FIA presidency. The two-time World Rally champion and multiple-time Dakar Rally winner, as well as the father of Carlos Sainz Jr., is considering his run for the top step of the FIA's overall leading presidency. He'll be going toe-to-toe with current president and fellow former rally driver Mohammed bin Sulayem. But on to the starting grid then for round 2 of Season 8, and it's just Boris on pole position from Tyler Vermaak, the two reunited since their very late season squabble in Season 7. White Doctor makes third with Audi Pete on the second row, starts alongside the Aston Martin in fourth. Rounding out the top 5 is Elite Cassie, and onto that third row is SN Queese in the 888 Ford Mustang. Behind him, the Blue Frog and Wishful Winnings in 7th and 8th, VSR Grizz and VSR Otzi rounding out the top 10. Regent in 11th with Tommy in 12th, Chris MCK08 in 13th, Antion 14th, Funky Fish in 15th, Twiglet 16th, ETE Giles in 17th position, with Smiler, Hin Hin Pappy and AERT Zach rounding out the top 20. Taz MCFC in 21st with Abok 22nd, Daily Boy in 23rd, Boyshay in 24th, rounding out the top 25 it's Aussie 207. Behind him, VSR Dollar Up in the solitary Lexus RCF. Shawnee Mack, who was somewhat the centre of attention of controversy in the last round gone, starts 27th ahead of Jayco 14. Soviet Mario in 29th on a blinder qualifying has seen him in a very, very far from home position. We were hoping to give him more screen time. It's definitely going to be an interesting run for the number 26. Tommy Johansson starts alongside him to round out 30 positions. With a minute and a half before the start of the formation lap. We'll be with you in a moment's time. And now, right on the back of our 30-second warning, we'll be able to get on board with the pole sitter, Just Boris. Alongside him will be Tyler Vermaak on that starting row of round 2 of the championship. We're on board now with the Lamborghini of the 999, Season 7's champion, on the tails of a very unfortunate opening round for the 999. Let's see what Boris can do this time around, especially not having to share the limelight with fellow Lamborghini OSR Saturn, who sat out this round. We'll potentially see him again as early as round 3 of the championship as we start this formation lap. However, let's quickly take a look at the calendar for this season. Of course, we're here in Spa. Last round you joined us from Watkins Glen, and next week you'll join us for the first sprint race of the championship, one of 3. First of all, starting off at the Red Bull Ring on the 14th of May. It'll be the first time here on TRTM we've ever covered a race out of Spielberg, Austria, and it's going to be a very exciting round if I had any mind about me. Staying on board then with the 999 as we begin the formation lap. Just Boris has definitely got a lot to pick up from, starting on a 50-point deficit coming into round 2 of Season 8. He's 28th overall, 10th in class, has a lot of time to make up for if he's looking to see double on championship endeavours, especially in the golden overall categories. You'll have Tyler Vermaak and White Doctor for company. White Doctor as well, who looks to inherit potentially the championship lead as soon as, or as early as the end of this race. A lot of hopes, a lot of ambition at such an early stage of a 14-round championship. It's going to be a sight for sore eyes here to see if Boris can make his way out of the mayhem that is quickly mounting at his rear quarter on his run down the Kemmel Straight. Now that'll be going flat out at over 150 miles an hour when the lights go green and we go racing here in Spa for round 2 of the championship. Looking around the field though, we've got plenty to discuss, especially in and around what I dubbed the danger zone earlier on in this stream. Now, starting from 5th and going down to, I'd probably say, about 20th is where a lot of our drivers are going to find their way into a potential bit of trouble. We can see here towards the trailing ends of that top 10 into the start of that top 15. We have Regent. We followed him a little bit over the course of qualifying. He's surrounded on all sides here by competent pack fighting machinery, courtesy of McLaren and Porsche. It's going to be a very, very tough start. We've seen Regent get his hands dirty when the time calls upon it. We know that when put under pressure, he can perform. But can he perform with the likes of the Ford Mustang? We saw a lot of his talents on display in his tenure with Ferrari last season. It's going to be a whole different kettle of fish to try and handle new machinery under such airtight conditions. Same story applies to the Blue Frog, also with Ford, who we saw last season with BMW. Now, a bit more of a comparable difference between machines there, especially compared to Regents, which was a bit night and day between the more nimble and agile 296 and the more stable and heavy Ford Mustang. The BMW, really all it does in the comparison up against Ford is trade a little bit of that down low grunt and acceleration for a little bit more poke in the corners. It's definitely a alarmingly nimble machine for a front engine rear drive GT3. One that the Ford Mustang looks to challenge since its debut 2 years back in 2023. Quis just makes his way into what I would say is the danger zone, because a lot of drivers will be looking to make those early door moves, knowing full well they've got an hour of racing ahead of them before the checkered flag. A lot of drivers do get lulled into those early moves and making that count, knowing that, especially with how strong the pace is in the field inside that top 10, their best opportunity is the element of surprise, and then trying to hold things off from the word go, really. So looking back up with our front row, we'll stay on board, as a matter of fact, with the car starting from 2nd as he chases Just Boris out of La Source and down through Eau Rouge and Radion when the lights go green. Now, we'll be starting not from the Grand Prix paddock like it would in the Belgian Grand Prix, which, so we've heard here on TRTN, is potentially soon to be thrown into a year-on, year-off basis, which is just a frankly absurd statement to be saying live on air. As we head out of Blanchemont, we'll stay on board then with Tyler Vermack. Right alongside him will be Just Boris at the start of round 2 of the championship. 30 cars, 15 cars either side of it as we go rolling here at about 42 to 43 miles an hour down to the line. Of course, a little bit more to go here before the lights go green and we go racing here in the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Doesn't start here, despite what it would have you believe. We've still one more corner. We're going to go rolling around La Source at turn 1. We'll actually be starting parallel to turn 2 on our way down towards turns 3 through 5 at Eau Rouge and Radion. So it doesn't give our drivers a lot of time to prepare for the tumultuous uphill climb. Such a dangerous set of corners. The most iconic corner in the history of motorsport, dare I say it. There's a bit of a truth bomb. Eau Rouge and Radion is just an utterly iconic section of the track, but right now, can we squeeze 30 cars going flat out from the word go here in a moment's time down that section of track? Well, we'll find out in a moment's time here for round 2 of the championship here in Season 8 of VSR Phoenix. Without further ado, 30 cars in all. We're green and racing here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, and already an impressive getaway from Just Boris, with Tyler Vermack hot on his trails. Right behind him, fellow Aston Martin White Doctor looking to usurp 2nd position already. Things looking interesting on our run up through Eau Rouge and Radion. It looks relatively clean for the time being. I spoke too soon there, as there goes VSR Dollar up. Head over heels, I believe. No, it was Taz, actually, as a matter of fact, not Dollar up. Taz head over heels there. The 996 also caught up in the fray there was Jayco 14 by the looks of it. Well, Tommy Johansson, one of the two. Jayco 14 does have damage. He's getting away there from VSR Smiler. See here with Regent, who is inside the danger zone. Making our way around Lacombe and Melmedy, our second major crunch zone here in the opening sector. Trouble already are brewing, as we can see on our way down to Lacombe. Drivers already running into several instances of trouble. Yellow flags do fly for this whole section of the track. You see the 96 there facing the wrong way. From the perspective of VSR Smiler, that was Daily Boy, I believe, in the number 97. It was the number 96, as a matter of fact. So that's the twin car there. That would be GTR Twiglet in the Mercedes AMG. A very, very unfortunate start then. Getting up with our top 5 though, as things continue to heat up. We just quickly check in here with VSR Funky Fish. You can see ahead of him, VSR Grizz had to take a very, very wide exit out through turn 12 and down towards turn 13 and 14 here at Campus before we get to Stabilo. Right behind Funky Fish at the moment is ETE Gilles. We did get to see Gilles get his elbows out in Watkins Glen last week. What can he do here as we make our way around turn 15 on Funky Fish? We do want to try and get on board with our top 5 as soon as possible, but let's just quickly see how things boil over in the battle of Porsche v McLaren. We're on board with VSR Funky Fish at the moment in the defending car for the battle of 14th position. Out through Blanchimont for the first time then, flat out. Boris still leads in the 999. We can see the Funky Fish is trying his luck on Grizz, and now the Porsche does have very good braking. And he's caught Grizz by surprise there, so much so that there was a little bit of contact between the pair of them on their way through turns 19 and 20. He's going to try 2 times the charm on his way down towards La Source. He's going to have to go the long way around town here as VSR Grizz is holding the inside. ETE Gilles, as you can see, is sizing the pair of them up from a distance as we head around turn 1. Gilles trying to surf the line. We'll just stay on board with these 3. This looks to be a very exciting battle inside the top 15. Grizz having to defend at the moment from Funky Fish and Gilles, all in contention for 14th position. 13th, as a matter of fact. Up through Eau Rouge and Radion, you can see 3 drastically different lines between all 3 of them as we go heading out of turn 6 and down the Kemmel Straight. This is one of a myriad of battles going on at the moment inside this field of what is now become 29 cars, or 28 cars as a matter of fact. We've lost 2 cars over the course of the race already. A very unfortunate start, but not to be unexpected. Spa has given us plenty of starts like this before, as we see a very ambitious inside lunge by Gilles. Can he make it stick by the time we get to Bruxelles? Doesn't happen this time around. We'll catch up with these guys later on as we check here. Just briefly, we've caught on board with Aussie and Smiler, a double spin between the Aston and the Porsche. Now, we saw Aussie find his way into trouble last week. This is possibly the worst case scenario for Aussie 207 in the Porsche. Now, as we cut away from Funky Fish, this was down into Bruxelles just a moment ago. And we quickly snapped across. You can see there's Aussie in the background. I believe there may have been some kind of contact with Smiler as well. Both of them almost in sync there as they spun. This is the back of the top 10 we were looking in with here. This is Tommy in the number 66, the yellow and blue Porsche 911. Right behind him is Regent. And ahead of them, Audi Pete and VSR Oatsy. Not the best start then for Pete in the Audi. He was inside that top 5 by the end of qualifying. Inside the top 6, I should say, by the end of qualifying. Checking in here, Wishful Winnings is definitely on quite a riot here up against the 2 Fords of Essen Queesum, the Blue Frog, the 888 and the 61. Marking the last of our top 5 positions at the moment. That is dangerously close between the pair of them. We quickly check in with our leading few. We can see it's business as usual then, as White Doctor has usurped 2nd position off of Tyler Vermack. Elite Cassie looks to do the same for the last of the podium positions on Vermack in the BMW. Let's quickly catch back on board then with our battle of 5th position. Essen Crease versus the Blue Frog and Wishful Winnings. As a matter of fact, let's try and get a view from the car in the middle of that fight. Let's try and get on board with the car currently residing in 6th position. That being, if we can catch them in a moment's time here, the Blue Frog in the number 61 Ford Mustang. This is all in that contention for 5th position. He's chasing Essen Queese ahead. We may even see fundamentally the fight for 6th position, as he may have to go defensive in a moment's time. We head down through Lacombe and Melmedy on our way through turns 7, 8 and 9. Down towards turn 10. So things simmering out between the top 4. Boris already a multi-second lead in the 999. The number 4 in trouble on his way down to Lacombe and Melmedy, that being Shawnee Mack. So it seems that repeat issues from Watkins Glen rearing their ugly heads here for the number 4 heading into round 2 of the championship. We're on board at the moment with the number 61 caught firmly in the centre of not only the fight for what was going to be 5th but now 6th. Essenquist ahead of him in 5th. And now he's having a scope up. How exactly does he go about defending for 6th position on his way to Blanchimont? Things definitely slowing down inside that top 4. Things livening up outside the top 5, as we see here around Blanchimont at turn 18. You can see it's practically nothing between the Ferrari and the Ford at the moment. Wishful Winnings competing from the reserve class since his tenure last season. Tries his luck down through the bus stop chicane. Blue Frog holding his ground though. He's not buckling or yielding 1 inch of the track to him. Stalwart defence by the Mustang. We'll catch up with them in a moment's time here. As we take another look around the track, just out through La Source. See ahead of him there, Essenquist on a very comfortable run away now into the back of that top 5. He's holding on to 5th and slowly trying to reel time in on Elite Cassie. He'll be able to do so, especially down this incredibly long section of the track here. Eau Rouge and Radion only playing a small buffer in the overall top end these Fords have to give today. Despite those 20 kilos on board, that's done very little to hamper their tenacity for straight line speed, and already gaining 0.3 of a second to Elite Cassie as Essenquist behind him. You can see still hanging on for dear life in the slipstream as Wishful Winnings on the Blue Frog. So still much to be discussed in that fight for 6th position. Blue Frog though looks to be at his most vulnerable heading into the more manoeuvrability intensive sections of Spa as we get now into the more technical section in middle and final, where the Ford would definitely be under siege from the more nimble and agile Ferrari. See Wishful Winnings already starting his efforts at the exit of turn 10, so he's wasted absolutely no time in his efforts to try and get past the Ford. But as you can see, the moment we leave any kind of corner, it's immediately back to the advantage of the number 61. That unparalleled acceleration and top end is one of the major defining factors of the Ford Mustang in class. It's one of its strongest attributes. It makes up for its slightly loftier handling, especially compared to even its own front-engined compatriots at BMW, Aston Martin, Mercedes and Lexus, with just this absolutely raw straight-line speed. He gives you this fantastic sort of analogy of the hammer versus the scalpel here. The Ferrari is a very precise machine. The Ford is one of action and straight line speed and very direct force. Looking around the field then, as we see things start to bunch up, especially around here from 9th backwards. So we can see the gap at the moment, half a second between Regent and Tommy. Behind him is Audi Pete by half a second, and then Chris by half a second as well. It seems to be a very consistent train of about half-second gaps here as we head up through Blanchimont. All of our cars in unison down towards the bus stop chicane at turn 19 and 20. So after 10 minutes of racing here, things already livening back up after the expected bedlam of the race start. Definitely placed a few drivers apart from where they'd like to be in qualifying. Now it's up to them to make things count over the next 50.5 minutes of racing. We quickly saw there, heading down the Kemmel Straight, try and get on board with them as we see troubles here for GTR Daily Boy. He's into the pit lane, and this is one of the major characteristics of the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps is this obnoxiously long pit straight. Taz has already taken his stop inside the pits here, and these pit stops can be double, if not triple, the length of any other track around them. Now, riding on either side of this championship before us was Watkins Glen International, which is actually renowned for one of the shortest pit straights for an American circuit. And then ahead of us is the Red Bull Ring, one of the shortest pit straights for a European circuit. So definitely an awkward spot for drivers, especially relying on strategy today to try and make things count when it's nearly double, if not triple, the amount of time spent just getting to the pit box, let alone what you need to do once the jacks go up. Looking at the moment, it's a 2-second gap between White Doctor and Just Boris. Behind him there, Shawnee Mack, giving away over the course of Blanchimont. Behind Behind him, Tyler Vermack by 3.8 seconds. So not much really in the way of discussion inside of our top three. No anticipated change of leadership of this race, especially with just over 3/4 of an hour left to go. Not really anything hotly contested on the horizon for that. As we see here, Blue Frog and Wishful Winning still giving each other very good company here inside the top six. You can see here from the rear view of the Mustang as we just get past Shawnee Mack in the number 4 McLaren there, the black, yellow and red. So you sort of get to see the difference here in cornering capacity up Eau Rouge and Radion. Now the Ferrari is having to deal with a little bit of aero stall as well, just by being in the dirty air. But despite that, it has so much better rotation up through this section of the track. So it's able to hold very, very closely on and has to rely on some of that slipstream there to even keep pace with the Ford. As you can see, heading down into Lacombe and Melmedy, it's much more at home here in the medium to low speed sections of the track, where it's definitely able to leverage a lot more of its engine placement. It's got a better centre of rotation, a better centre of gravity compared to the Ford. It's just a fascinating dichotomy to study between these two cars, as they are such popular choices in the current day for Assetto Corsa. As a matter of fact, we can see here for the driver changes, we reported on this last week. You can see the most moved two cars have been from Ford at the moment. Ferrari just escaping the charts there with, I believe, 3 driver moves this season. The most popular have been Aston Martin, Ford and McLaren. The least popular have been Lamborghini and Lexus. Coming into Season 8, practically the entire grid has swapped to a different vehicle. That's what shook up the performance for quite a few drivers. It's definitely what's given rise to much better drives over the course of the season. Drivers are really having to get used to the machine now. Regulations for Season 8 dictate no more car swaps this season. What you see is what you get. You get what you get and you don't get upset about it. You can see for a lot of drivers, they are just knuckling down and getting on with it. We're seeing a lot more determined drives out of drivers that otherwise have had a bit flaky on and off performances. There is some real grit and consequence behind the way they're driving today. The conviction behind the way they're handling these machines is scarily close to the real thing at times. See, and Crease was getting closer and closer to Elite Cassie. His goal for a top 4 at the moment is still very much so on the table here and up for grabs. You can see the Mustang has been reeling in the BMW over the course of the last 2 laps. And right now, as we head out of La Source and down towards Eau Rouge and Radion, the charts for him to take 4th position is quickly coming into view. We'll stay on board with SN Crease on our run up through Eau Rouge and Radion from the perspective of the 888 Ford, as he's chasing the 98 BMW in front of him. Now Ford also doesn't have a huge issue with aero stall. Admittedly, this is much further back from the BMW than what we saw with the Ferrari behind the Blue Frog over the course of the last lap just gone. But there is trouble, and it was for the number 23 of Wishful Winnings as he was chasing up through Eau Rouge and Radion. You see here SN Crease and Elite Cassie getting side by side. So our efforts to try and locate the number 23 nearly took us away from what looks to be the flashpoint of this fight between these two. And as Blue Frog joins the fray, it is a 3-car fight. As we can see, already pushing and squeezing is SN Crease. He wants no third parties involved in his tenure for 4th position. This is already becoming a very exciting battle here at the quarter-way mark. We're on board then with SN Crease over the course of this next lap. All in contention at the moment for 4th position. He's up against Cassie in front, and behind him in the fight for 5th is the Blue Frog. Making our way then down through campus, turn 13 and 14. We take a look away from him as well to get on board with the car at the back of this pack, and who's quickly made up ground in his efforts to get with these drivers for their tenure of 4th position as the Blue Frog. You can see as we exit Kerber Paul Frere and up towards Blanchimont at turn 17 and 18, there seems to be a little bit of a lower drag setup for the Ford in front of him. Also, couple that with the fact that he has been in the slipstream of the BMW for the greater part of this entire lap as he runs incredibly wide out of turn 18. Now down to turn 19 and 20 at the bus stop chicane. We're looking more logically here at the battle of 5th position for Blue Frog, as there's a spin already for Elite Cassie. Was that instigated by any kind of contact as we exit the bus stop? Let's quickly get a replay on that. This was from the perspective of the Blue Frog as we exit Blanchimont. Already things were a little bit edgy between these three. We saw that slide out of Melmedy coming down into the bus stop chicane. It looked eerily close. There very well could have been contact. The cameras, though, not giving us the most revealing angles of such there. Lump in my throat. Up to the battle of 4th now between the twin Mustangs. SN Crease and the Blue Frog up through Eau Rouge and Radion. Daily Boy with a stop-go 30-second penalty to serve, currently doing so from inside the pit lane. A stop-go 30 here is an absolute race ender for any driver, no matter where you are in the standings. That is a penalty longer than most jail sentences, especially at a track like the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, where pit stops are already taking upwards of 3 to 4 minutes. Throwing an extra 30 seconds on top is like throwing an extra year on top of your sentence. And Lord have mercy on you if you need to do a drive-through penalty here, because that is practically a pit stop in its own respect. Now, depending on how large the grid can be, I've heard as well that it expands all the way up to the Grand Prix paddock. So some can get incredibly lucky by just coming in, being within moments of their pit box, getting stopped, and then just having to spend the majority of their time getting out of the pit lane, which isn't anywhere near as bad as having a pit box all the way towards the back down in the GT paddock at the start of the run uphill, which can be absolutely crippling. It's why in any endurance calendar, of which there are plenty both in real life and in the virtual world that holds the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, is a strategy an absolute must. And it has been the massive factor of race deciders over the course of the last 5 or 6 runnings of Spa throughout a myriad of championships over the course of our time here on TRTN. But then having a look around the field, we can see Funky Fish and Antion in contention for 14th position. Ford versus Porsche on our way around turn 15 at Stavelot, then turn 16 at the curb of Paul Frere. Funky Fish will have quite the task at hand here, getting back past Antion. As now the Mustang's in the clear, the Porsche is going to be holding on to the back of it, clinging to the rear bumper as we go through Blanchimont at turn 17 and 18. Antion, of course, was the bronze champion last season, now makes his drive up in silver, and what a way to start things off here in Spa. It's now just under 20 minutes in, he's making moves and slowly on the charge from just now, making his way up into the top 15 positions. Soon, he could be potentially eyeing up a look at the top 10. We can see Wishful Winnings now down to 16th position after that spin out up through Eau Rouge and Radion on his efforts to try and get past the Blue Frog. Looking around the field at the moment, Tommy versus Elite Cassie. Now, Cassie already had trouble down at the bus stop chicane. He's going to have even further trouble with that Porsche clinging to him for dear life down the Kemmel. Out of turn 6 we go, down towards turn 7 through 9 at the Lacombe and Melmedy complex. On board with Tommy then. This is all in that fight for 8th position. He's chasing down Elite Cassie, who's already had a race go from bad to worse here in that BMW. Has been incredibly unstable for him, and I suppose it doesn't help as well when he's getting bumped up through turn 19 and 20 or so, we're led to believe. Now out through turn 10 we go. Down through turn 11, you can see that Elite Cassie's getting his hands full already, so we're going to have to cut on board with the number 98 in a moment's time as we go heading down into turn 12. Let's see if we can get on board with Elite Cassie on his efforts to get around Regent. This is for 7th position in the race for the number 98. Down through turn 15 we go. It was practically millimetres there dividing the two on our way to the curb of Paul Frere. They're riding each other all the way into sector 3, taking the wider of the two lines. Elite Cassie scrubs a little bit of speed, but he's back into the slipstream almost instantly on his efforts to get past Regent. What's going to be the going rates between these two as they head up through Blanchimont? One does wonder. Heading into turn 18 we go. Regent holding centre mass of the road there. He's not giving up this position without a very good fight. It's one that Elite Cassie's going to have to give him in droves as he goes around the outside, then switches it back to the inside, then to the outside, then to the inside. A double switchback by Elite Cassie to put it side by side. If I were Regent, I'd be very frustrated by that. And I think it shows in the way that there was a little bit of a touch on the exit of turn 19. That is absolutely feral by Elite Cassie. A double switchback and then turns it into nearly a triple. Had it not been for Tommy being in the way there and the number 66, I imagine he would have just licked the stamp and sent it, and that would have been one of the greatest overtakes we've ever seen here on TRTN, especially in our time with VSR. Chaining together what has been a masterful comeback drive so far for Elite Cassie. We're going to look at the overall standings once we see the conclusion of this battle. Two very, very talented drivers in their own respect, going nearly side by side now. It looks to be the case down towards Lacombe and Melmedy. The Mustang, though, just having a little bit more top end. And Regent really pushing the envelope out now. Last of the late breakers, and the Ford, a very, very stalwart defence by the number 420. But is it for much longer? Heading down towards Bruxelles at turn 10. He's to the inside. Elite Cassie's going to try his luck here. Could be contact. A little bit of door dinging between the BMW and the Ford. Regent trying to line himself up for a move back towards the inside, but to no avail. A very, very well crafted overtake, much to the chagrin of Regent, already giving him the lights there. Pangs of frustration in the number 424. That could quickly fall by the wayside here. If he keeps distracting himself with what just happened, he'll forget to start defending from Tommy, who is right on his tail as we speak. Very well done, though, by Elite Cassie. Hallmark move there of a professional. A little bit of contact. Admittedly, I imagine most drivers want to avoid that, but in a heat of racing, some things are just unavoidable. When drivers are pushing the envelope out and really trying their luck, often do you end up in situations like this. We're joined again now by the twin Mustangs inside that top 5. Yellow flags, though, do fly. It was for the number 55 that ran into trouble just now and is back into the pit lane and now out of what appears to be this race. So that is a mighty unfortunate shame. And another driver throwing in the towel there, and that was down between turn 12 and 13 on the exit of Pouhon. We're on board with Tyler Vermack here as the last of our podium sitters, though looking up ahead we can see that the gap between our top two is starting to drop, if not has dropped down to a much closer distance than what we saw it last. Let's try and get on board with at least one of our two front-running cars here as we take a look around the paddock. You can see Soviet Mario is owed a little bit more screen time, but down in 28th position, not much can be done at this time for the number 26 McLaren. He's towards the back of the field. As a matter of fact, he is in plumb last, sadly, in the number 26. We'll catch up with him later on as we try and pursue our top two. 1.5 seconds divides Josh Boris from the White Doctor in the number 54 from the number 999. This could be a very exciting battle on our hands here, because not often is it you get to see a Lamborghini and an Aston Martin clash heads for the lead of a race at Spa, in a sport all too often dominated by Ferrari, McLaren, BMW and Ford. It is a real delight for the eyes and ears then to see V8 versus V10 in control for supremacy of that leading position. More on to that later. We're just checking in here with fellow V10 Audi Pete, joined by another V10 of VSR grids. The two Audi R8s, 44 and 77 in 12th and 13th as we speak, heading around Melmedy. We wanted to get back on board with some of the other battles we were taking a look at. Last one we had a gander at was this fight, which culminated right down here at the no-name curve, also sometimes called the Jackie X curve at turn 11, between Regent in the number 420, sometimes also going by FR77. The car ahead of him, the number 98 of Elite Cassie NL, a triple switchback move that ultimately culminated in what was a fantastic move down the inside. Carried it all the way through and had it wrapped up in a nice neat bow by turn 11. But as we head back through Fagnier and Campus on our way down towards Stavelot at turn 15, things look to close back up here. Regent's not been happy about that move since it's gone down the lap before, and he's looking to take some revenge here. A little bit of a nudge between the two as they exit turn 16. Elite Cassie having to go ultra wide there to avoid an incident. Regent retakes the position and Tommy follows suit. Let's just get a replay on that on the exit of turn 16. It did look like a little bit of contact between Regent and Cassie. You can see there, again, the same story as last. Our camera is not super revealing, but you can see the BMW did go ultra wide, and we weren't necessarily expecting Cassie to have done that in the first place. You could definitely make the suggestion that this was some kind of push to pass, and it's gone from bad to worse for Cassie because he now has a drive-through penalty because of the chicanery between himself and Regent. So he's going to be absolutely furious with the number 420 by the end of this race. I imagine words will be exchanged, and not many of them I can say on stream, so we'll just keep it at that. We're on board with the twin Mustangs again as they make their way up to the top 4. Already the pit lane coming alive as we're nearing the halfway mark of this race. Now, having a look then at our standings, you can see that top 5 unfazed at the time. Now, they'll be eyeing up a move to the pits in the next 8 minutes or so. Just Boris leads the fray then by 2.2 seconds to the White Doctor in the number 54. Aston Martin make a 2 and 3 formation right now with Tyler Vermack on the podium in the number 94. Admittedly, wanted to be up on that front row fighting with the leader. Was usurped for position quite early on by White Doctor, as it seems to be a growing rivalry between the two Astons inside that top 10. Blue Frog and SN Queese and the twin Mustangs round out that top 5. Behind them, VSR Otzi, Tommy, Chris MCK, Grizz and Antion inside that top 10. You can see the myriad of cars making their way through the pit lane. Regent, Elite Cassie, ETE Geels, Audi Pete and Funky Fish, and among them with Elite Cassie to serve a drive-through penalty, so there'll be an extra pit stop on the horizon for the 98. That could definitely squander his hopes for a solid result today, and he'll be absolutely furious that things came to be in the battle between himself and Regent, especially where it boiled over the course of that last lap gone. Fortunately, though, it happened down towards Blanchemont, so he's able to just take that drive-through and go. And he's back down the Kemmel as we speak from 16th position. These drivers will continue to drop down the order. You can see behind them, though, was already quite a few of our early pit stop runners. Now, this was due to that chaos in the opening lap we saw up through Eau Rouge and Radion and then through Lacombe and Melmedy, where we saw many a yellow flag incident kick off for the start of round 2. VSR Smiler, Wishful Winnings, Aussie 207, Taz MCFC and GTR Daily Boy all having took their pit stops earlier on. Behind and around them, Tommy Johansson, Shawnee Mack and Soviet Mario do make a very complicated final 10 positions. They're there for a multitude of different reasons. We're back on board with our two Mustangs again. So you can see the gap now between them having separated by quite some way. They were 3 tenths apart on the last lap alone. A 2:19.3 to a 2:19.6. 1.2 seconds between Blue Frog and SN Queese to round out that top 5. So having a look back around the grid, fellow Ford VSR Antion, the Bronze Series champion on his drive in silver, now makes his way to the top 10. Admittedly, this might come back to bounce on him in the next coming pit stops. It will bounce back and potentially have him outside of that top 10 by the end of this race, but he has shown very good grit over the course of this round indeed. We'll catch up with him in a while's time. VSR Funky Fish was one of the drivers he was fighting with, but now the Porsche has gone in through the pit lane, took their pit stop, and are on the long run to the checkered flag. Now 31.5 minutes until they see it. His fellow Porsche there, Jaco 14, making his way in to start his run to the pit stops. Aussie 207 rounds out our 3 Porsches in this round, and we will have to catch up in a moment's time. The number 996 in trouble, round turn 12, and back into the pit lane. That's Taz MCFC, the McLaren, potentially out of this race. He's down into 24th position now, and they're out of the race. Sadly, another DNF here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. It's an indiscriminate track, and one of the most brutal still in circulation. I think it shares a lot of that in common with the 2 circuits it released alongside in the early 1920s. Of course, Spa came out in 1921. It opened for the first time as a dedicated racing circuit in 1921. The year after that would be Monza, and the year after that would be the Circuit de la Sarthe. So 3 absolutely brutal European circuits. That interwar Grand Prix and motor racing boom that Europe saw that has turned it into these sort of holy grounds of motor racing that it is today. Those 3 circuits still standing with over 100 years of pedigree between all 3 of them. We're on board now with Tommy Johansson round Blanchemont and the Aston Martin. Right now down in a lowly 24th position. He still has a pit stop to serve here with just about half the race left to go. Checking here, here's Regent, down in 18th at the moment, but with plenty of drivers now into the pit lane. Among them was Elite Cassie, now taking their mandatory pit stop. Regent's up and scot-free into an extra position there at the halfway mark of this race. So the race leaders having already come in. We'll take a look here as you can see White Doctor and Just Boris already having taken their pit stops. Boris now out of turn 6 and down the Kemmel straight. White Doctor still on his way down. Just Boris appears to have not actually took a pit stop there. That's my mistake. But White Doctor, as you can definitely see, is on his way down the perilous run to the pit box here. You can see makes his way all the way to the GT paddock before he's even within a chance of coming to a stop and getting perhaps some new tyres or some more fuel on board. And now this was one of the major issues a lot of teams ran into in endurance events here on ACC. You could definitely see where a lot of that frustration comes from, because it is a almost eternal waiting time to get anything done in the pit lane. It's why strategy is an oh so essential part of what constitutes a race win here at Spa. It's really one of the founding aspects of whether or not you win or lose a race held here at Spa, especially with that rule of the mandatory pit stop. Now, in some series that don't run it, then it's not really an issue. It's pit if you need to, pit if you must. Try and get to the checkered flag and hope there's no issues with the car. When strategy creeps in, this is the real chess, not checkers situation here at Spa, unlike other tracks that you can just pop in at any real point in the race, be done within about a minute and a half and be back on your way before the checkered flag. This takes time and effort to construct a proper pit strategy. As we can see, plenty of drivers still in the pit lane now. Tyler Vermaak, Tommy Johansson, VSR Antiong, Chris MCKO8 and VSR Abok among them right now inside that pit lane. Having a look around then to see where our next fights could be coming from. As we scroll around, we see Tommy XXC and the number 66 Porsche all the way up into 4th position on a very late run to the pits. We're past that halfway mark now, where we get to see a good 60 to 70% of our pit stops take place. Perhaps running for the long game here on the Porsche, knowing that the tyres can take him just a little bit further before he needs to swap them for brand new ones. Same story for Hin Hin Pappy as well in the 777 Ferrari, competing from the reserves category. Wishful Winnings now up 2 positions. In the last time we saw him from 24th to 22nd. I'm sure there is definitely going to be these sort of pangs of longing for what that position could have been had he not spun up through Eau Rouge and Radion when he was chasing down the Blue Frog. It was a very exciting opening battle between the pair of them, but such is the case here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Just like Le Mans and Monza around it, it is an indiscriminate circuit whose race it will destroy with reckless abandon. So it really doesn't matter what level of skill you've got in this category of GT3 racing. It is a track that really does not look either too fondly or too heavily upon any one kind of driver. It really just spins the wheel, decides whose race it's going to ruin today. It is an incredibly tough circuit to consistently nail down. See now Hin Hin Pappy into the pit lane. Soviet Mario now up to 26th of a 27-car race. He's up an extra position there because of the yellow flags. Slowly creeping his way to a top 25 finish at the moment. Shawnee Mack 15 seconds ahead of him in the number 4 McLaren. It's been a rough day for Soviet since his departure from Ford. We mistakenly said he was with BMW last season. You can see that this big mix-up for manufacturers over the course of Season 7 to Season 8 has definitely thrown the sort of toys in the toy box around here to sort of see where things land. It's definitely shifted the outlooks for most championships for quite a few drivers. Where drivers were struggling last season, they definitely aren't now, and drivers that were flourishing last season are struggling. We really get to see this bizarre dichotomy creep into play. So you can see Just Boris has now taken his one and only pit stop this race with 25 minutes left to go. Now, this is quite signature Boris. We saw this all the way through Season 7. He really does enjoy a very last-second pit stop. And might it be a little too close to call for the 999 as he's forced himself within a second there of White Doctor. Now, these two look to be inheriting those top 2 positions when all of the pit stops are said and done. It is a long, long way before the checkered flag here. Still 25.5 minutes. And things could rapidly shift in the developing fight between the 54 and the 999. We'll stay on board with them on our way through the middle sector, as it looks to be one of the closely emerging next battles of this race. We'll stay on board then with last season's champion, Just Boris, now driving for Lamborghini since his departure from McLaren. We saw the inklings of this last season in the final drives at Suzuka, where he made his departure from the Woking-based firm and moved over to Lamborghini in their Huracan Evo 2, the final available specification for Lamborghini's Huracan program before it's phased out in favour of the upcoming Temerario GT3, set to be revealed this year. Will come pre-packaged with a twin-turbo V8 developed in-house at Lamborghini headquarters. It is a very exciting time for Lamborghini in their next step up, where things have kind of fallen flat in their hypercar development program with the SC63 becoming one of the many great hypercar blunders, up there with the likes of what is currently emerging to be Aston Martin as well, rather reluctantly since the hype generated around the Valkyrie. Also, notable examples include Van Wall, Isotta Fraschini, and Glickenhaus. Seems that things are still quite nicely flourishing for their GT3 division. It's something they understand all too well at the moment. It seems to be the one part of motor racing they've really been able to carve out to their own likings. As Lamborghini always wanted to go toe-to-toe with their contemporaries at Ferrari, it was this rebellious nature against the conventions Ferrari threw on the table that birthed Lamborghini as a company. Ferruccio Lamborghini wanted to make a Lamborghini for the kind of people who are someone. And always threw that argument around, you get a Ferrari when you want to be someone, you have a Lamborghini when you are someone. It was this counterculture that brought Lamborghini into life, and they had a completely opposite angle of introduction compared to Ferrari, where Ferrari was a racing team developing cars for basically what was a hobby to generate more money for the race team. Lamborghini was a car company generating money for a motor racing program. It was the other way around. And this shift in philosophy always meant that whatever Lamborghini would try their hand in never necessarily went the way they wanted it to. They tried GT1, they tried GT3 for quite some time, then they tried hypercars, as we saw as well. Nothing ever really quite stuck until the Huracan came around, and that was because Lamborghini entered its long-winded and still withstanding partnership with the Volkswagen Automotive Group, so they were able to inherit a lot of technology birthed out of the boffins at Audi Sport, and this is what gave rise to what is a very, very fantastic machine in the modern day. It's such a signature car, it's almost quite a pity then that it loses its iconic V10 engine. Of course, it shares that engine and has shared that engine all the way since the Gallardo with the Audi R8. But it was a fantastic motor. And really, we do have to almost feel a little bit sorry that Lamborghini gets to miss out on being one of the many great engine proprietors in GT3 racing. It is an unmistakable sound now. If you were to go to a track day and not even see what was on track, you'd know a Lamborghini would be there. It's a noise as synonymous to GT racing as the flat six screamers at Porsche. So it does make you long for a return to normality with V10s and V12s, but in the modern day, those times are long since gone, and really, in the sport, it is hard-pressed to tell you whether or not you'll find much success without twin turbos. I think we get to see once-in-a-lifetime opportunities out of brands like Ford that dare to run naturally aspirated engines in the current day, but really, if you haven't got turbos, likely chances are you haven't got titles. So Tommy and Twiglet into the pit lane. So this is now, we were waiting to put it up here. This is the battle for the lead of this race, with Tommy still in the pit lane at the moment. The number 66, after holding on to the race lead for a few laps now, loses out to the same two that started from that front row, Just Boris and White Doctor. I say the same two. We had Tyler Vermack on that front row, but I think White Doctor always kind of had it in mind that he'd be having that position back off. It was a matter of hundredths between the two of them at the end of qualifying, and right now White Doctor has been one of the emerging performances that we've been hoping to see coming into Season 8. This sort of change of pace for a lot of drivers would allow these new performers to come in and really wow expectations. It is one of the many great parts of starting afresh from season to season, and it has definitely introduced a new spur of competition. Now, Boris has started 50 points down in this championship after finishing 28th overall, just out of the points margin, I believe, out of round one. Admittedly, not his fault. We saw what sort of went on. We saw the aftermath of it, really, with Boris having to peel out of that first race at Watkins Glen after being taken out by attempting to lap the number 4. An incident that is rather best kept silent until we have all of the information at hand to discuss it. It's rather not our place to be commenting on who was exactly at fault. It seemed more often than not that it was just a bad place, bad time situation. Neither here nor there, but the point I'm trying to make, he starts the season on quite a far back running start here. 50 points away from the lead of the championship, and right now up against the driver set to inherit the championship lead off of OSR Saturn, that being White Doctor, who has been a real breakout performance with Aston Martin. Right now, he looks to even be challenging Boris for position. It's 0.8 of a second between the Lambo and the Aston Martin as we head out of the curb of Paul Frere. Out through Blanchimont we go then. catch up with these two in a moment's time here, as we can see a battle emerging back here. Now, this is in for 12th position between Funky Fish, Pete and Antion. We just saw this on our maps. The 207 of Aussie 207 in trouble there with the Porsche team out through the bus stop chicane. We'll stay on board, though, with Audi Pete as we go making our way around Campus Corner. He's got a Mustang to his rear, a Porsche in front. We get to see one of the very rare opportunities to study the nuance and difference between mid-engined, rear-engined and front engines. We get to see mid-engined in the middle, rear engine at the front, ironically, and front engine at the rear. Right now, though, looks to be the two-horse race for 12th position, as having that wide exit of turn 16 has confounded Antion's chances over the course of this lap. He may be able to swing things back. Swing bings, what does that mean? Swing things back on our way down towards turn 19 and 20. Funky Fish holding the inside. That may just invite Pete in to try his luck around the bus stop chicane. You can see the Audi's got great acceleration, but almost too much so, as he has a stab of oversteer on the exit of turn 20. Now back down towards La Source at turn 1. Antion's back with the pair of them, and that Mustang is going to be an omnipresent figure in this fight as we go up through Eau Rouge and Radion. Now out of La Source, down through turn 2 we go, and up towards turn 3 through 5. Stay on board with the car slap bang in the middle of things. It's the number 77 of Audi Pete competing with the Audi Sport team for 12th position. Up the road from him is a fellow Audi, number 44, VSR Grizz. Not too far away from Chris MCK08, who rounds out that top 10 at the moment. Looking into the final standing positions for the last 20 minutes of racing at the moment. More likely changes coming out from our top 5 here as Blue Frog and SN Queese now swap positions, with Blue Frog leading the charge, SN Queese trailing in that battle for 4th position. Right now, though, staying on board with Audi Pete as we continue to recount the overall standings. Just Boris leads by about a second to White Doctor, with Tyler Vermack still in a trusty 3rd position. A great points yield on the horizon for the 94. Blue Frog in 4th with SN Queese in 5th. ETEG 6th with Tommy 7th. Region 8th, Otzi 9th, Chris MCK in 10th position, Grizzle 11th. We're watching here 12th through 14th. VSR Funky Fish in 12th. Audi Pete we're on board with at the moment in 13th, not too far away at all. VSR Antion in the number 1 Mustang as we head down into turn 12. He makes 14th position. Rounding out the top 15 is GTR Twiglet. VSR Abox up quite away from the start of this race into 16th position, ahead of Jaco 14 and Hin Hin Pappy in 17th and 18th position. Elite Cassie having to salvage what's left of his drive today in a reluctant 19th position. That's much to the favour of that drive-through penalty he received in his clash against Regent down through turn 16. We head through turn 15 at the moment, almost to the site of the crime here of what went on earlier on in this race that has waylaid Cassie's chances for a solid result today. He's currently in 19th, making the most of what's left in today's round. VSR Smiler rounds out the top 20. Wishful Winnings in 21st, Aussie 22nd, Dollar Up 23rd, Daily Boy in 24th, Tommy Johansson 25th, Shawnee Mac in 26th, and Soviet Mario still in plumb last 27th in this race. Trying his luck now to the outside. He tried the inside, now going to try around the outside, but again squeezed out of position for any kind of hopes to get side by side with VSR Funky Fish. I must say, for the Porsche, whose straight line speed has always been a little bit of a question, especially up against Ford and Audi, VSR Funky Fish has put on a very respectable, I should say, defending performance. Really struggling to get the words out today. Out through turn 1, now down through turn 2. Up through Eau Rouge and Radion, and now things starting to heat up more and more. Less with the battle of 12th and more concerning the battle of 13th as VSR Antion closes the gap, and as you can see it becomes a bit of a push and pull between all three of them. They reunite down the Kemmel, 0.2 of a second either side of it from in front and behind for Audi Pete. He was trying his luck down towards Lacombe, but he's really going to be quite in trouble when it comes to braking distances, where the Porsche makes up for its lack of straight line speed. It makes up for in braking distance, but I don't think that's necessarily going to matter with big contact between the pair of them on their way out of Melmedy. Let's get a replay on that. So you can see heading up through turn 7, then makes turn 8. I don't think Pete was expecting the Porsche to get on the brakes so early, and you can see tried his luck towards the inside, and it was just a gap too small to commit to, not realising that the Porsche was going to close back in. That was just sort of a racing incident for the pair of them. They keep going on track at the moment. Just under 15 minutes left to go. Just Boris leads the race by 1.5 seconds to this driver here, who I must say is emerging as one of the most remarkable drives I've seen all season, and one of these very once-in-a-lifetime kind of drives. We saw almost mirror-matched last season by Just Boris in his introduction to VSR Phoenix, where he then went on to decisively win Season 7. If we take a look at the previous champions for Season 7, Just Boris was among them in the gold and overall category, Otzi in the silver, and Antion in bronze. Having a look at the previous champions of all time, you can see that Boris got his first and currently only championship over the course of just Season 7 on his debut to VSR, no less. So this is a real interesting split performance we see now from White Doctors. After this round, if he can finish in second, as far as it stands, he'll be taking the lead of the championship and by some way to the nearest available competition, heading into round 3 at the Red Bull Ring for the first of our sprint rounds this season. One of 3, as a matter of fact, getting that calendar back up. We discussed it over the course of the starting of the race procedure. But we'll be heading to the Red Bull Ring next week, then to Silverstone for round 5, Zolder for round 6, Snetterton for another super sprint round for round 7 and 8, Monza for round 9, Paul Ricard for round 10, and then the third and last of our super sprints at the Circuit Ricardo Tormo, sometimes also called the Valencia Circuit, for the 25th of June for round 11 and 12, Barcelona for the penultimate round, and back to where everything started last season, to the Circuit Kyalami in Johannesburg, South Africa for round 14 of the championship. A bit of a snap then for White Doctor as he exits turn 15. Out through turn 16, you can see it's all adding up as he gets towards the back straights here at Blanchimont, because now that gap's opened up to nearly 2 seconds between himself and Just Boris. Now, Boris hasn't been able to run away with this performance like he has over the course of Season 7 on a multitude of occasions. It is quite refreshing then to see competition give him a very good run for his money here. He's not been able to relax over the course of this race today, especially with the Aston picking up quite a latent performance boost, courtesy of White Doctor's drive in the 54 at the moment. He's been able to harness really most of the strengths and not a lot of the weaknesses of the V8 Vantage to go up against the Huracan here. Pound for pound, it won't have him in the corners, but he's really giving it a very, very good go. And for a car that was viewed as one of the most beginner-friendly vehicles, a real jack-of-all-trades, to see it really be wielded to such precise parameters is really quite refreshing to see. It's one of these once-in-a-generation drives, and I think we're quite spoilt for choice here because it's twice in a generation when you consider Tyler Vermack as well. Since his move away from Ferrari and Ford and over to Aston Martin, he's settled in rather nicely in the V8 Vantage, right now taking him a very healthy P3, unopposed right now from the 2 Fords behind him that are about 6 seconds away, that being Blue Frog and Essenquist. Speaking of Aston Martins, we can see Tommy Johansson moved away from, I believe if memory withstands, McLaren last season to move to Aston Martin, and while being in 25th, he's still able to settle in rather nicely. Is a much more friendly vehicle to take to compared to the more unstable McLarens, Ferraris and Lamborghinis. It's what made Aston Martin an incredibly popular choice when the entire grid would swap vehicles heading into Season 8. It's what was among 4 choices made, and that's joint first with 2 other manufacturers coming into this season, namely, getting a look at it here, being McLaren and Ford. I think that sort of tends to represent, at least right now in VSR, and I wouldn't say this on a wider scale for console because we see it's a little bit different in each side of it, but it seems to represent the growing trend at the moment, the move back towards more conventional machinery. Experimental drives like what we see out of Lexus, and if we can get back on board with them, the leading Lamborghini, and what we saw in the last round as well was also a leading Lamborghini, is not typically preferred by most of the field. They like to stay in the more clear and narrow, and those who have really pushed the envelope out and dared to pick these machines that admittedly have slightly less available support for setups and for sort of vehicle guides as well, compared especially to McLaren. That move to Lamborghini seems to be a gamble well paid off for Just Boris, because despite his hardships in that last round, he has not suffered a similar fate today, and with 10.5 minutes left to go, he really does seem unstoppable here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. He seems right at home now after the teething issues of Watkins Glen. With OSR sat out of the picture for at least this round of the championship, very few stand in the way to challenge Boris's return to the top step. Having a look around the field to see where our next fights are coming from, not an awful lot to say the least. We can make suggestions that there are drivers on separate lengths of the race that are just sort of lapping traffic now. It seems to be a bit more of a calm and mediated drive compared to the chaos we saw in the opening 30 minutes. As we close in on amongst the last 10 minutes of racing, it really does just seem to be a case now of knuckling down and just trying to survive this track and moving on to the next race. in the Red Bull Ring, which, if I had any mind about me, would suggest it's probably also going to be a very chaotic round. Not only are we dealing with the Super Sprint format, which are two smaller races jam-packed into one race day, it is also a track like the Red Bull Ring, which, even designed for Grand Prix racing, has proven to be among the more chaotic Grand Prix despite its simplistic nature. It's going to make for quite the riot drive from these GT3s. They've proven already over the many years we've been covering them here on TRTN that they can turn just about any racetrack into a battleground. So we see now the next occurring battle appears to be that between Abok and Jayco 14. Abok in the number 27 Ferrari on his way down towards the bus stop chicane. You can see that that one has been misplaced for some odd reason. That's very strange. Let's get on board with Jayco 14 then. We'll fix that graphic for the next stream. That's very bizarre. Wouldn't be a TRTN stream, I imagine, without a few technical bloopers, because really it is a bit of a ramshackle construction working with OBS sometimes. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you fail miserably. So now we're on board with Jayco 14 in the number 14, now registered as the number 424 as we head up Eau Rouge and Radion in his pursuit of VSR Abok. You can just listen to that absolute wail of the engine there from the flat six as we go heading down towards the common Melmedy. Truly one of the most iconic sounds from the world of Grand Touring. Really, I don't think much else compares to that. Most people who have been around racetracks in the... Oh, never mind, we'll pick up on that conversation later on. That is a big hit of the wall there. Over rotation out of turn 10 for Jayco 14. Let's just quickly have a gander then at what exactly went on. Now, this was out of Bruxelles, sometimes also called Rivage. He had a healthy chunk of curb heading in, goes a little bit deep past the apex, is trying to swing things back in. But then it just over-rotates past that point. He really overpowers the back end of that car, and it was almost a dead spiral into the wall. It could have been some kind of steering lock problem for Jayco 14. Very bizarre stuff indeed. I suppose we'll pick up on the conversation of the Porsche 911 later. Obviously, Abok isn't exactly clear of problems himself. Now that he is further away from Jayco, he's still also picking up healthy chunks of curb for himself. And we've seen anything from Ferrari. We know that curbs are not its bread and butter. As a matter of fact, it's one of the easiest ways to turn this Ferrari into a sort of temporary light aircraft on this track, as we've seen Ferrari go head over heels plenty of times over the curbs here, notoriously unstable when put under pressure, just like the McLarens that it often shares the limelight with. Speaking of McLarens, here's ETEG was on his way through Melmedy. 6.5 minutes left to go. It's been a bit of a quieter round. Things were definitely much more active in the opening 10 minutes, and drivers have settled in to a rhythm here. Spa is a very ubiquitous track. It's one that you can't treat like a sprint racing venue. This isn't your, this isn't your Missanos, your Imolas, your Watkins Glens. This is a very methodical circuit. Think of it as sort of a miniature Nürburgring Nordschleife. It isn't a circuit that takes lightly to these quick and spontaneous proceedings for position. A lot of it has to be calculated. A lot of it has to be thought out. It is one that requires a lot more deliberation with whether you go for the move or not, because it's a track that will very easily punish over-enthusiastic opening drives, as we've seen in those opening laps. And really it is the tenacity for a driver's patience and ability to pick their fights accordingly that makes or breaks most drives here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Over the course of the series that we've covered, we've seen plenty of over-enthusiastic drives that on paper have the pace to win most races that they enter go by the wayside, just because it isn't a track that often rewards over-enthusiastic driving. It is, despite its grandiose nature as the largest ever FIA Grade 1 track, a deceptively difficult one at that. And this is compounded by that dilemma in the way you set the car up, as just like quite a few FIA Grade 1 tracks, it tries to aim dead centre of where the car needs to be set up. Not too high downforce and then not too low either. It's an equal complements of technical twisting corners and long open straights. As you see that almost night and day difference between Sector 1 and 2 here. We're on board with the Blue Frog on his way uphill with 5 minutes left to go. You can see it is really a case of keep your foot to the floor and pray the car's in the clear and narrow by the time you make turn 6, and then it's practically flat all the way down the spine of the track here before the heavy braking zone takes us into Sector 2, starting off with Turn 7. And like I said, it is a night and day difference because this is an area that would absolutely require a lower downforce, higher speed build. But then you've got to weigh up the pros and cons of getting into Sector 2 here and being completely swamped through for no grip because of that setup. So it requires these drivers to hit almost for 50% at all times on those setups, and not too much and not too little. Hitting that Goldilocks zone is one of the major challenges on top of a consistent drive. You see here, Hin Papi and Elite Cassie right alongside each other. One of the final battles of today. We'll try and get on board with the trailing car of these two, that being Elite Cassie. He's definitely had a bit of a strange race, to say the least. He's been up in that top 10 for the greater majority of the race and then waylaid his hopes because of that drive-through penalty, or because of one tap over turn 16 with Regent. That was just one tap too many for the stewards. And I'm genuinely surprised that he ever received that drive-through penalty in the first place. It kind of goes to show how far these drivers are willing to push the rule set here in their efforts to go against each other. Now we know just how easy it is for the stewards to crack down on little cuts here and there, like what we saw out of both drivers on their way up through Eau Rouge and Radio. Now side by side though, let's just see if Elite Cassie can make his way up to 18th position on Hin Papi. The BMW is ever so slightly better in a straight line, but the Ferrari again better for brakes. Does leave many people scratching their heads here, but as it appears, Elite Cassie's up into 18th position. And it may be just a little too late in his hopes for a top 15 finish. It is a real salvage drive today for Elite Cassie, but we've seen luck's rarely ever been on his side ever since his debut back in Bathurst last season, where he picked up a drive-through penalty on the start despite a very, very promising qualifying performance. Just seems to be the bad luck that good drivers receive. We see now the next battle here between ETE Gilles and Tommy in fight for 6th position. We'll stay on board then with Gilles, who's a previous time champion here in VSR. Now chasing down Tommy, who last time we saw him up in the limelight like this was back in the Zolder Super Sprint last season in Season 7. We really wowed expectations in both qualifying and race performances, picking up a podium in his Ferrari 296. Now in his tenure with Porsche, it's still looking to be business as usual. It's these surprising flourishes of performance out of the number 66 is what makes him a very iconic sight in amongst the silver paddock. And then since then he was promoted up to gold, so it was definitely a good drive paid off there. But you can see he's just absolutely left Gilles for dead there down the Kemmel Straight. I think it had been a case that the McLaren was lifting off, trying not to pick up another infraction from race control, and that's really waylaid Gilles' hopes for a top 6 here. It seems to be a very conservative drive by the 57. Is there a fuel concern perhaps on board for ETE Gilles' car? Well, we'll find out later on at the checkered flag. We're looking now at the Battle of 10th here. Otzi and Grizz looking to do battle. The number 6 versus the number 44 will stay on board with the leading car and the winner of the silver category last season on his time with Aston Martin. Now Otzi makes his move to McLaren and is getting his hands full just like last round here, right at the very end of round 2. This is all in contention for the last of those top 10 positions, so vital points up for grabs here in any championship hopes. Now looking in the silver category standings for Otzi, he does make the podium at the moment, but he's got to make up 12 points if he means to lead the silver category by the end of this round. That is quite a tall order, even this early on in the championship, but he's giving it a very good go. Right now, the championship leader for silver is right up ahead of him in 9th position, the number 81 of Chris MCK08, who looks to extend the gap here with only a minute left to go. The 777's in trouble now on his way down the Kemmel Straight. The 999 still leading the charge here. We'll be getting on board with Just Boris and White Doctor as they're taking the checkered flag over the course of this next lap coming. We're in amongst our final laps today. Well, let's just quickly see what goes on in our proceedings for the top 10 here between Otzi and Grizz as our final battle of the day. You can see down the order as well, Aussie and Dollar up very close to one another, but on two separate strengths of the race. Right now staying on board with Otzi. Grizz giving it a very good go here. A sea of green on our way down through Blanchemont. What is the Audi going to try here? Around the outside, going to switch it to the outside for the bus stop chicane, then to the inside. He's all over the shop on the back end of Otzi. What is Grizz thinking to do here? What is his strategy going forward? I think he was genuinely just trying to regain control of the Audi in those waning parts of the race. Down to the line we go then, and on to those final laps of today. We'll be getting on board with the 999 in a few corners time, currently making their way through turn 12. They have 8 corners to go then before the end of round 2. What has been a very splendid battle, to say the least. See that Gilles ran into some trouble then and yellow flags, I believe, came out for the opening pit lane. That was for the 777. That was Hin Hin Pappy that ran into trouble. Hence the yellow flags. But the 57 is in real trouble here. The gap between the 57 and the number 6 is dropping. And there, Gilles may be out of fuel at the end of this race. So this is very much so the battle for 9th position as drama continues to kick off inside the top 10 here. Grizz will be up into the top 10 positions. He'll be delighted with that at the very end of this race. We'll catch back up with these two in a moment's time as we head through Lacombe and Melmedy. We try and catch on board then with Just Boris, as with 0.7 seconds between himself and White Doctor as we get down to the checkered flag here for round 2 of the championship. It's a very close finish between the pair of them, but as it turns out, 2 rounds in, back to the top step, Just Boris takes the checkered flag and wins in Spa here in round 2 of the championship by a narrowing margin there. 0.6 of a second between himself and White Doctor. Fought to the very end there between himself and the Aston Martin. Let's get back on board then with the rest of the field. Tyler Vermack not too far away from the checkered flag at the moment. Looks to be taking a podium position in the number 94 Aston Martin. But we want to check in here in the fight for 9th position between VSR Otzi and VSR Grizz. They're down through campus at the moment at turn 14, on their way to turn 15 at a moment's time. In Stavolo, a slide around turn 14 for VSR Grizz. Very, very close stuff here in the final lap of round 2. But you can see Grip is quickly fleeting the situation for Grizz. He's really having to wrestle the controls now on that Audi to get it into form. You can see also incredibly close stuff here between what appears to be Twiglet and Funky Fish for the top 15 positions here. Interceded at the moment by Shawnee Mack. A few battles to pan between here. We'll quickly see what goes on as Grizz fleeting behind Otzi. It was a very solid battle between the pair, but Otzi looks to take the upper hand in that fight for 9th position. A very splendid battle indeed between both VSR drivers, number 6 and number 44. Let's get back on board though with Twiglet v Funky Fish. Mercedes versus Porsche. Down towards Blanchimont we go. Turn 17 gives rise to turn 18. Funky Fish's gap is dropping there. The Mercedes has better straight line speed. Where's it going to go as we get down towards the bus stop chicane for the last time today in round 2? It's going to be very close between the pair of them. You can see Twiglet trying to line himself up for the better exit, but I think it's just a little too late for the Mercedes. Down towards the line goes Funky Fish for 14th position. Actually, that's 13th as a matter of fact, with Gilles having dropped an extra there to the back of the top 15. You can see Jaco and Elite Cassie getting up past them now. Cassie running into trouble though at the bus stop chicane. Jaco will go up into the top 15 then at the checkered flag. Very well done. Cassie up to 16th. Gilles just limping it to the line now. He's got no fuel left in the 57. On the thoughts of what could have been. You can see how close the checkered flag is there. Shawnee Mack is slowly rolling up to it as well. It looks like both McLarens are out of fuel. Shawnee Mack makes it to the line. Oh, it's really too difficult to watch here. Can he get to the checkered flag? Oh my word, there's no one there to help him there. There's no recovery crews nearby, nor is there any cars to push him to the checkered flag. He stopped just before. Oh no. Oh, that is a crippling sight for ETE Gilles. He's about, I think that's about 6 foot there from the checkered flag. Oh, that is absolutely brutal for ETE Gilles. Oh, truly, truly. What a performance today, though, by Just Boris, White Doctor and Tyler Vermack to make that podium. Honourable mentions to the drives by Otzi and Grizz today as well. A very solid fight between the pair of those two, up for 9th position in this race. And also honourable mentions to Funky Fish versus Twiglet. We can see the Blue Frog here, the real MVP, though, pushing Gilles across the line. That's a properly grand sight at the end of round 2. A bit of a mixed bag for us today here on TRTN. We kind of had to throw everything together here, so we do apologise for a somewhat inconsistent performance on our end, but what an interesting round indeed. If you're joining us here for VSR, exclusively we'll be here next Wednesday for round 3 and 4 from the Red Bull Ring. If you're joining us later this week, we're going to be at Watkins Glen for the penultimate round of what we're assured is a wet race coming up for the NLRL Sunday League as we head towards the end of Season 2. That's all from us, though. A very brief end here on TRTN. Very well done to Just Boris on his first race win of the season and his first race win since 2 races ago, as a matter of fact, at Suzuka and round 16. Better late than never then, and so begins his potential challenging position for Season 8's championship. More to come at the next round next Wednesday. That's all from us, though. Have a wonderful rest of your day and take care.